Welcome back, everybody. My guest tonight has spent over 3 decades in government and served as President Trump's national security advisor. His new book about his time in the Trump administration is called The Room Where It Happened. Please welcome Ambassador John Bolton. Ambassador, thanks for being with us tonight.
Glad to be with you.
How thick is your skin? Because you've gotten a lot of criticism about waiting to tell us all this information in the book rather than speaking out earlier. Have you gotten used to that?
Well, you never get used to it entirely, but I think there are very important reasons why I didn't do it, why I thought the impeachment effort led by the House of Representatives Democrats was badly guided, badly mistaken.
I've heard those because I've seen some of the interviews. I'm just curious, how do you feel about people criticizing you about that?
I think it's part of being in Washington these days. I think if you don't have a thick skin, maybe you ought to think about another line of work. I'm not saying I enjoy it by any stretch of the imagination, but if you're not prepared for it, you're just not going to be heard in the Washington debate.
All right, good. That'll make this interview easier. Okay.
Fair warning.
Now, Donald Trump called you a traitor, and some people out there might think you have an axe to grind against the GOP. How conservative are you?
Well, the exact opposite is true. Look, I got my start in politics at the ripe old age of 15, handing out leaflets for Barry Goldwater in 1964. I've been involved in the Republican
You sound
Party.
like fun.
Yeah, believe me. I was a White House summer intern for Spiro Agnew in 1972. I worked that was before being a White House intern was famous. I worked in the Reagan administration. I worked in both Bush administrations. I have written more op-eds than I can count, given speeches. I've been a conservative all my life, and to me, this is about philosophy. If I didn't feel strongly about it, I didn't have to go into government. You certainly don't go into government for financial reasons. I just could have stayed in the private sector and practiced law after I got out of law school. But to me, particularly in the national security field, it's philosophy driven. And that was one of my principal problems with Donald Trump as I experienced it.
Now, you didn't have to go into government and you didn't have to go into the Trump administration. You had to know that that was a whirlpool of chaos in there. Even those of us looking from the outside who never got to go in could see it. Why did you go in knowing how chaotic it was? Did you think that chaos was a ladder that you could climb and do the right thing?
I certainly heard all the stories, but I had also spoken with Trump before he was elected, after he took office, and it was my belief that this could be overcome, that you could set up an orderly process to advance what I thought were policies that Trump felt comfortable with, policies he had articulated in speeches during the campaign. And for those who say, but Trump and Bolton never got along, all I can say is I was on Fox for over 10 years, and I don't think anybody's ever criticized me for being shy about my opinions. He saw me all the time. If he didn't understand what I was saying, I honestly don't know what I could have done to say it any clearer. So I entered, I think, aware of the problems, but optimistic that they could be overcome. And the book is the story, perhaps, about how I was wrong about that.
The book is packed with shocking revelations that really shouldn't be shocking because they seem so true to form for Donald Trump. As National Security Advisor, you saw interaction between Trump and world leaders, and you depict Trump as someone with a soft spot for autocrats. Who took advantage of that the most, of his soft spot?
Every one of them. It's a close race to see who could see through him the clearest and tried to manipulate him. Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin, Kim Jong-un, Erdogan of Turkey. There's a long list of them. And to me, that was obviously very troubling. The president didn't study the facts of the issues he had to discuss with these leaders. He didn't prepare to the extent he should. There were some cases where we were able to brief him. But basically, and he would say this to his advisors and others, he wanted to do this the same way he did real estate deals in New York. And maybe that's the way others do them too. But to go in with kind of his gut feeling, he would say that he could make a nuclear deal with Iran in a day, that he could just size Kim Jong-un in a few minutes, and they could cut a deal very quickly. is just not realistic. But he never understood that. I always had the feeling sitting in these meetings that they could see right through him. It was not a fair fight.
But none of that could be surprising because you saw from the campaign that he was a completely incurious person who had no interest in knowledge or the truth. So you've said that he has no philosophy and that itself is very dangerous. What's more dangerous, no philosophy or a philosophy that you disagree with?
Well, I think it's they're what they call in the arms control world incommensurables. I mean, I think the choice I face, and I think many others from the Republican side face in November, is a Democrat who we disagree with, Joe Biden, with a Republican that we don't think is up to the job. It's not a happy choice. I think that's something that I wish we could find a way around. I don't see it's going to happen though.
You say that Trump had a penchant to give personal favors for the dictators he liked, and that he wanted to establish a personal relationship with these people, and these favors were sort of a way of establishing this personal relationship. Are those personal relationships really important in international affairs, or is it just kind of show business friendships that aren't that meaningful?
Well, it varies, of course, but I do think there's a role for personal relations. It's easier if there's an ability to talk between two leaders, whether they're allies or adversaries. But I think the president had trouble distinguishing between a good personal relationship with Mr. X and the truth about the bilateral relationship between the two countries. I don't think, for example, Vladimir Putin or Xi Jinping had any trouble distinguishing between those two things. But I do think Donald Trump did. That was one of the reasons that I felt he was always so vulnerable to manipulation.
I assume that you speak to your fellow long-term conservative Republicans who've served multiple administrations. What are they saying behind closed doors? I mean, there are high-profile things like the Lincoln Project and Republicans against Trump, but when the cameras are off, what's the conservative opinion of Donald Trump?
Well, look, I think many of them, in fairness to Trump, look at the comparison, and as I did in 2016 with Hillary Clinton, look at the comparison with Joe Biden and say, whatever we think of him, he's not going to be a Democrat subject, especially these days, to the pressure of the left. Look, I bought that argument in 2016.
No, he's going to be subject to the pressure of Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping. He's a person willing to sell out the interests of the American people for his own re-election. What could be worse in Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden's philosophy than betraying your country to a hostile foreign leader? Sir.
Trust me, I understand that point. What
will you answer that question?
Yeah, I'm trying to.
Okay, I'm sorry. My apologies. Go ahead.
What I thought in 2016 was we at least have to try it out. And so I voted for Trump. Having experienced 17 months of working with him, I can't in good conscience do that again. And that's why I'm not going to vote for him, and I'm not going to vote for Biden.
I guess what's exasperating is there is absolutely nothing that Donald Trump has done that is surprising to me. My rule is everything you think about Donald Trump is probably true because he's not deep enough to get your socks wet in. He's incredibly readable. That's why when he ran casinos, the House lost. There's nothing to learn about him. That's why he's essentially a boring person. How did you not know beforehand that he was just callow?
Because I couldn't believe it was that bad. And I know other people say they saw it from the beginning.
But you're an international negotiator. How could you be naive? You've dealt with the worst people in the world.
You've really insulted me now by calling me naive. I thought it was possible to work with somebody. I thought surely they would want to learn about the complexities of arms control negotiations and that sort of thing. As I detail in the book, that turned out not to be true.
Ambassador, we have to take a quick break, but stick around, everybody. We're right back with more Ambassador John Bolton.